This week, Jesus teaches, Jesus heals, Mark 12 to 39. Now, introduction, people need healing. Now, if we look around us and observe, many people are in need of healing. We have a prayer time during our congregation, during our service, and quite a bit of the prayer is taken up about for people who need healing, and among other things, and quite often there's so many people that need healing that there's not even time to pray for all of them. So we have a website, and we also have a app. That's the app on my phone, which you can look at during the week, and we encourage you to look at this either on the website or on your app on your phone. Look at the prayer needs of the people and pray for them. Include it as part of your daily prayers during the week. And people are needing physical healing, but people can need other healing in their life. And so what other types of healing can we have? We've already mentioned, and this is where they're supposed to fly in, the different things, different topics, but try not to jump ahead, so pretend they're flying in. Okay, so people can need physical healing, and there can be multiple issues. People can have mental health issues, emotional issues where they need healing. There can be relational problems. There can be problems with your spouse. There can be relational problems with family members. There can be relational problems with friends, with work associates, with neighbors. For example, there can be a fractured relationship with your spouse. There can be financial issues where you need healing in your finances. You could have problems making your mortgage, your problems with your budgets, your charge card payments. There can be healing where addictions are concerned. Addictions can be addictions to substances like tobacco, alcohol, heroin, or there could be addictions to behaviors like gambling. And you can even think of other places where healing is needed. Now, who's to blame? Usually when something goes wrong, you like to blame somebody. Like for me, if something goes wrong in my life, it's really nice to have somebody to blame. The worst thing is if you have to blame yourself, then it's really annoying. But anyway, so who's to blame? So you can blame yourself. For example, if I got lung cancer and I was a chronic smoker, then that's my problem. If I have financial problems because I'm gambling, it's my fault. If I have a relational problem with my spouse because I had an affair, well, that's my problem. But sometimes you could need healing, but it's somebody else's fault. If I get in a car accident and I'm in the hospital, I'm in need of healing, but a drunk driver ran into me, that's not my fault, it's his fault. And sometimes there's nobody to blame. It just happens, and you can't establish a cause and effect relationship. And here's the one that's interesting, I find interesting. When I was a teenager in my 20s, it was during the Cold War, and there was a faction of society that said all the problems in society, all the need for healing were because of the political system. And if we would just put a communist system in place, then everything would be healed. With capitalism was the problem, and communism would heal everything. And this is, it might sound strange to you, but this was really intellectual people believed this, like people in universities. The majority of the university professors in the arts and the humanities, at least, they actually believe this. So it's the political system. And then sometimes people blame God. The problems are because of God. And you just read a lot of the Psalms, and the person writing the Psalms, they're blaming God for the problems. So how do we deal with the need for healing? Well, if there's a physical problem, we often will turn to medicine, to doctors, to our healthcare system. And we have a very good healthcare system. And there's more and more advances all the time. With mental health issues, we can turn to psychiatrists, psychologists, counselors, friends, relational problems, counselors for that, advice from friends, financial problems. There's all kinds of books on personal finances, budgeting. For addictions, there's counseling, and there's 12-step programs, which are very good, like for Alcoholics Anonymous, has quite a bit of success in that area. So that's a way of healing. And sometimes the intervention for the healing is successful. Like when I was about 6 years old, I fell, I broke my arm, I went to the doctor, he set it, put it in a cast, and 6 weeks, 2 months later, I can't remember when, I was all healed, my arm was better. Sometimes people struggle and they're in need of healing, and it just never comes. I remember there was a young fellow that I knew when I was in high school, and I knew him from the youth group, and he was using marijuana, and it was fairly common then, and so he had marijuana, and then he just was into that, and then he went into other drugs, more powerful drugs. And I'm not saying it always happens, one leads to other, but for him it did. And he got more and more deeper and deeper into it. But then he really wanted to get out of it. He really did. And he tried lots of things. He tried this, he tried that, and he just couldn't get healing. And at 42, he killed himself. So the only way out was death. So sometimes people need healing, and there just doesn't seem to be a solution. So that's the introduction to our passage. And our passage this morning is in Mark 21 to 39. And this is early in Jesus' ministry, and in the last 2 Sundays, he's given us a really good introduction to Mark. And so just as sort of in the context, Peter, Andrew, James, and John, they've been fishing all night, and there's been no luck, which must be kind of discouraging. They're fishing, they're working, and they got nothing to show for it. And so they're coming in the morning. Jesus meets them. He tells them, well, put your nets down one more time. They said, well, we've been fishing all night. Nothing's happened. But if you say so, they do it, and the nets are full of fish. So, of course, they're really happy. So that's the context. And so this passage we're looking at picks up right after this. Now, usually when I'm speaking, I read the whole passage, and then I give our thoughts on it. But I'm going to try something different this time. I'm going to read the passage in sections, and we'll think about the sections rather than the whole thing. So we'll just see how that works out this morning. Okay. So, the first part of our passage, a new type of teaching. So that's Peter, Andrew, James, and John, plus Jesus, they went to Capernaum. And when the Sabbath came, Jesus went into the synagogue and began to teach. The people were amazed at his teaching because he taught them as one who has authority, not as the teachers of the law. So, Jesus goes to the synagogue in Capernaum, and it's Saturday, which is the Jewish Sabbath, and pretty well the whole town is there. And this was normal. This was normal in Jewish society then. Most of the people would be at the synagogue or the church, the synagogue, on Saturday. There could have been a few out playing golf, but most of them were in the synagogue. And Jesus is teaching, and I wouldn't be surprised if during the teaching time, probably a lot of people are bored. You know, they're just looking around. They think, when is this going to end? When can I get to the golf course? When can I get on a picnic? When can I go to the beach? Whatever. But in this particular case, the people are gathered, and they're amazed at the teaching. they're amazed at the teaching of Jesus, because it wasn't like, it says it wasn't like the teaching they were used to, the teaching of the scribes and the religious leaders. And the scribes, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, they were known for meticulously studying the law and the prophets. But their teaching lacked the authority and the power that Jesus was demonstrating in his teaching. Jesus' teaching was compelling, it was authoritative, it was delivered with power, with conviction, and it just wasn't what the people were used to. But why? Why was Jesus a good teacher? What makes a good teacher? How about a good education? You think a good education would make a good teacher. As a matter of fact, to be a teacher in the schools in Ontario, you have to have a good education, you have to have a university degree in something, and then you have to go to teacher's college, go to more school, and then you're hopefully a good teacher. But Jesus had no formal theological education. Maybe he received some as a child, some teaching in the Sunday school they had, but his education was a carpenter's apprentice. How about, was he a successful businessman? Sometimes you think a businessman might be a good teacher, especially a successful one, because he can teach others in his business how to run the business, be successful in the business. Jesus was, I'm assuming he was a successful carpenter, successful tradesman. Today he would have been considered a blue-collar worker, maybe lower middle class. That's speculation on my part. Did he have a lot of money? Sometimes people think people who have a lot of money have to be good teachers because they could teach others how to get money, make money for them. And I like to think of that. I don't know if you saw if you've seen the movie Fiddler on the Roof, and there's the song "If I Were a Rich Man," and the guy is just saying, it's hilarious. It's about a Jewish community. It's a hilarious movie, hilarious. And the guy's praying to God, and he's singing it. It's "If I Were a Rich Man." And he's just saying, "Please God, why don't you just make me a rich man? And because if I'm a rich man, then I can teach in the synagogue, because the rich people, they know everything and they're right all the time anyway." So anyway, but Jesus was not rich. As a matter of fact, when he was dedicated in the temple, his parents could only afford the least expensive of the sacrifices. And when Jesus died, the only worldly possessions he had were the clothes on his back. That was it. How about having a high position, a high theological position? Like the Pharisees and Sadducees, they had the high religious position, a high societal position in Jewish society. Jesus had no religious office. He had no big position in the synagogue. As a matter of fact, this was one of the things the people that had the position complained about him. Like, who are you to teach? What position have you had? What education have you had? What wealth do you have? What position do you have in society? He had none of that. And so from a worldly point of view, Jesus had no qualification to teach in the synagogue. But despite all this, the people were astonished. They had never heard someone speak with this authority. And he spoke with confidence, with power. It set him apart from the other teachers. It demonstrated his divine authority that Jesus holds as the Son of God. His teaching was not based on human reasoning or interpretation. It came directly from the creator of the universe. And the theme of his authority is seen throughout the Gospels as he continues to demonstrate his powers through his words and actions. So things are going quite well. Jesus is teaching. The people really like the teaching. They recognize it as authoritative. But there's some opposition to the teaching of Jesus. Just then, a man in the synagogue who was possessed by an impure spirit cried out, "What do you want with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." "Be quiet," said Jesus sternly. "Come out of him." The impure spirit shook the man violently and came out of him with a shriek. So the opposition to Jesus' teaching is immediate. No sooner has Jesus finished teaching, this demon-possessed man enters the picture. And the opposition is from a spiritual realm. And the people at this time were familiar with demon possession and the power it could hold over people. I just want to put in a plug for The Chosen, the series. If you haven't watched it, I'd really encourage you to watch it. A great series. But it really demonstrates the power that demon possession can have over a person. And in the character of Mary, she was demon possessed, and it really showed how this had a hold on her. And this is not the last time that Jesus will have to deal with demon possession, but Jesus solves the problem very well. He gives 2 orders to the demon. He says, "Shut up," so that stopped interfering with his teaching, and then he said, "Get out." So, shut up, get out, shut up. The demon is silent. Get out. He leaves the man. The man has his life back. So, and of course, this will be the last time that Jesus deals with demons. And this incident validates the teaching of Jesus by demonstrating that Jesus had a unique and an ultimate power over evil and over demons. And actually, I have to go back to The Chosen again. I said that Mary was possessed by the demon, and Jesus heals her of the possession. And Nicodemus is watching this, and one of the things that really amazed Nicodemus was that Nicodemus, as a Pharisee, was powerless to deal with the demons, but Jesus drove out the demons. So, at least in the Chosen series, one of the reasons he wanted to meet with Jesus was to find out more about Jesus. Like, how are you able to cast out the demon when we, the religious authorities, are powerless to deal with it? Okay, so news spreads. The people were so amazed that they asked each other, "What is this? A new teaching? And with authority, he even gives orders to impure spirits, and they obey him." News about him quickly spread over the whole region. So, the news of Jesus performing the miracle, initially it's just the people who were in the synagogue, a limited number of people, but it spreads really fast. And like, they didn't have the internet in these days, but it went viral anyway, and just by word of mouth. And so it was both the teaching and healing of the demon-possessed man. So the disciples and Jesus, they go now to Peter's house. As soon as they left the synagogue, they went with James and John to the home of Simon and Andrew. Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they immediately told Jesus about her. So he took her hand, and helped her up. The fever left, and she began to wait on them. So they go back to Peter's house, and Peter has now witnessed 2 miracles that Jesus has done. The miracle with the fish. Jesus could fill up the nets with the fish, and he's also seen Jesus can cast out demons. So Peter has a sick mother-in-law that's living with him. Now, I had a absolutely wonderful mother-in-law, Evelyn. Some of you might remember her. She lived to 101. Absolutely wonderful woman. For you younger people, let me tell you, you don't just marry a person, you marry a family, and I lucked in there. And she was a wonderful, but she never lived with us, and I don't know about, but it had to be a pressure on Peter to have a mother-in-law living with him, plus she was ill. But Jesus has already demonstrated his power over the spiritual realm by casting out the demon. Now he demonstrates his power over the physical realm by healing Peter's mother-in-law. And I just want to say, as a character to the testament as Peter's mother-in-law, as soon as she is healed, she gets up and she starts serving. Now, if you had a mother-in-law living in your household, wouldn't that be the type of mother-in-law that you would like to have? And that was the character of Evelyn, my wonderful mother-in-law. Okay, so next. Okay, so I should have got that. So, okay, many come to Jesus for healing. That evening, after sunset, the people brought to Jesus all the sick and demon-possessed. The whole town gathered at the door, and Jesus healed many who had various diseases. He also drove out many demons, but he would not let the demons speak because they knew who he was. So news of the healing spreads fast, both of the demon-possessed man and of Peter's mother-in-law. The news spreads really fast. And just hours later, the whole town is at the door, people wanting healing. And must have been very annoying. But Jesus does comply. He heals many of them, but not all of them. Other priorities. Very early in the morning, that's the next morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Simon and his companions went to look for him, and when they found him, they exclaimed, "Everyone is looking for you." Jesus replied, "Let us go somewhere else, to the nearby villages, so I can preach there also. That is why I have come." So he traveled throughout Galilee, preaching in the synagogues and driving out the demons. So it's the next morning, and Jesus takes a time out. I would have thought, like, he might have wanted to sleep in after a really busy day, and all the people at the door keeping him up really late. But he got up early in the morning, and he went to a quiet place, and he spends time in prayer. And this is sort of the start of a pattern we see in the ministry of Jesus, that he takes time out to go be alone, to rest, to meditate, to be in prayer with God the Father. And particularly when before he's going to engage in some important ministry. And before he went to the cross, he spent the whole night in prayer. And it's a good model for us. A good model for us to take time to meditate, to pray, to read the Bible. And Jesus, he also lets the disciples know his priorities. He said, "Let's go to the next town, some other towns, so I can preach there also, for that is why he came." So even though Jesus, he gets the bigger crowds with the healing, like he gets way more people with the healing than he does with the teaching. So you think, well, if I want to get the crowds in, I'm going to do the healing. But his priority is the teaching. Okay, so that's the passage. And I have 5 takeaways. 5, what about us today? What's applicable for us today? So 5 takeaways. The first one, just out of interest's sake, archaeologists have found the ruins of a house in Capernaum that was converted into a meeting place. And it's thought that it might be the home of Simon, Peter, and Andrew, although there's no conclusive proof. And the remains are under the foundation of a church that was built there in the 5th century. And this is just a reminder, and there's lots of other archaeological sites in the Holy Land which have to do what happened when Jesus was preaching. So this is just a reminder to us that these events that are recorded in the Bible, it's not a folklore, it's not fairy tales, but they're real events that happen to real people in real places, and they have real lessons for us today. Second takeaway I have. There's many people in need of healing that will go to great lengths to seek healing. Just think of all the people that came to Peter's house. The word got out, the whole town's coming there for healing. And today, we have good medicine, good doctors, good hospitals, good health care, and many illnesses can be healed. But there's also the case that there's a lot of conditions, physical, psychological, mental, that they just can't be healed with the modern medicine. And unfortunately, sometimes there's the case that some people will try to take advantage of the situation, also often for money. In the internet today, you often see some clickbait that'll say something, what the medical profession does not want you to know. Now, hey, you're laughing, people must click on it, but I never thought of how idiotic I was until my first wife, Jolene, when she had cancer, there was no cure for it. There was a treatment for it. And meeting with the oncologist, and I can't remember the context of the conversation, but it was something like what the medical profession, what the doctors don't want you to know was the context. And he said, I spent 4 years in medical school. I spent 4 years in residence studying over 200 different types of cancer. And you think if I knew some cure for cancer with all the people I see, half of them in hopeless situations, do you think I wouldn't want them to know that? So that's just utterly ridiculous. So, and unfortunately, sometimes this is sort of spilled into Christian circles where and it could be with good intentions, some people are claiming to have special knowledge, special power to be a conduit for God, to be able to heal people. And I remember, it can actually bring disrespect to Christianity. I remember 20, 30 years ago, I can remember there was a certain location in Ontario where people were going for, a lot of it was for healing, and people would be falling down, slain in the spirit, flopping around, and claiming to be cured. And a CBC documentary went to do a investigative reporting. And so the guy, he held up, he says, I have this letter from a oncologist that says so-and-so was cured from cancer, miraculously. And so then I don't know how, the investigative reporter, they got a hold of the letter, and they actually went to the oncologist. And the oncologist said, well, that's not exactly what I said. What I said was, this person has got some relief from pain. And he said, that is significant, that they have release from pain. But he said, but they did not get a cure. So it just brings disrespect to Christianity. And so if there is a really, really fabulous claim, there better be fabulous information. That's what I'm saying. Okay, that's just a little hobby horse of mine. Okay, the next one is demon possession. My belief is that demon possession is real. Demons have real power. How common is it today? I don't know. I really don't know. I'm pretty sure it's not as common as when Jesus was on earth. Possibly when Jesus was there, the demonic activity was more common, more prevalent. But if you think, I'm thinking of demon possession and addictions. An addiction, the definition of addiction is somebody is doing something, they keep doing it, and it's killing them. They know it's killing them, and they keep doing it. It's hurting other people around them, friends, family, work associations. It's hurting them. They're still doing it. And people often will say, it's sort of in our vernacular, well, he has his demons. And I'm thinking they could be speaking the truth. It could be, I don't know, it could be a demon possession. Why else would somebody continue on in an addiction when it's that? Okay. The next one. Illness and demon possession are not necessarily the direct result of sin. But ultimately they're related. Illness is a result, ultimately, of Adam and Eve's original sin. It makes our bodies frail, and it makes our world decay. Possession, demon possession, is because of Satan's rebellion against God. Jesus came to rescue us from the results, the consequences of sin. Sometimes by physical healing, sometimes by exorcism of demons. And in Jesus' time, by his grace, he healed the sick, but that was not his priority, we saw. It's not always in God's plan to physically heal people, but we can always ask. Simon Peter was willing to ask. And the answer might be yes, might be no, it might be not now. But we are all terminally ill as the result of sin, and we will all die one day, except, of course, if Christ returns before our death. We will all face judgment, and that is the bad news. But there's good news in that God offers us a solution of healing of our terminal condition of death. And that solution is through the death and resurrection of Christ. And I'll ask the music team to come up now. If you want to know more about this, you can talk to me after, talk to one of the elders. And I'll just close with this verse. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. Thank you.